Night after night, his mind became a battleground of regrets and fears. Yet years later, travelers would journey for days just to sit beside him because his presence held a quiet, unshakable light. They called him the happiest man in the valley. This is the story of how he got there. Not through sudden luck, but through 5 small daily habits that built his 5 a.m. routine, conquered his midnight overthinking, and reshaped his entire existence. And could reshape yours. Before you walk this path with Jonah, pause and share in the comments. What is one tiny moment in your day, just a few seconds, that makes you feel alive? A sip of tea? A bird's call? A quiet breath? Jonah's workshop sat where the olive groves thinned into rocky ground. His hands were thick with calluses from years of shaping staves and driving iron hoops. But the real heaviness lived in his chest and in the darkness of his nights. He carried 3 invisible stones. The first was grief. His wife, Miriam, had died of fever 3 winters ago. Her laughter used to fill every corner of their home. Now the silence was so thick he could almost taste it. He still turned to tell her things in the dark, and the empty space that answered felt like a fresh wound every time. The second was poverty. He crafted barrels from sunrise to sunset, strong barrels for storing oil, grain, and water, yet barely earned enough to fill a bowl. Others in the village had shops, apprentices, plans. Jonah had only exhaustion. He was trapped in a cycle of mere survival. And the third stone, the heaviest of all, was midnight overthinking. When the world grew still and the village slept, Jonah's mind would awaken like a wild beast. Every mistake he had ever made marched through his head. What if he had called the healer sooner for Miriam? What if the merchants refused to buy his barrels again? What if he grew old and died alone, forgotten? The thoughts spun without mercy, knotting his stomach, stealing his rest. He would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, exhausted but unable to find peace. Dawn became not a fresh start, but a cruel reminder of another sleepless night. He stopped praying. He stopped hoping. He became a gray ghost in a gray world, haunted by his own mind. One evening, he sat on the stone edge of the village well. A family was sharing bread nearby. A small boy pointed and whispered, "Mother, why does that man never smile?" The mother hurried the child away. The words stung like nettles. Jonah realized he had become a warning to children, not a person. One day, a stranger named Elkanah arrived. Cedar staff, dusty cloak, eyes holding quiet light, and rested under the great sycamore. Jonah, dragging oak staves, tripped and fell. A gentle hand lifted him. "Your soul is limping. Your nights are a war." For the first time in 3 years, Jonah poured out his grief, his poverty, and his midnight overthinking. Elkanah listened, then shared, "I lost everything in a fire, and overthinking nearly destroyed me. An old shepherd taught me 5 small daily habits that rebuilt my mornings and silenced the night." Jonah's tired eyes sparked. "What practices?" "Walk with me these next evenings. They all begin at the 5th hour." As the sun bled gold, Elkanah said, "At 5 a.m., before your feet touch the ground, whisper 3 things you're thankful for. Your breath, the roof overhead, hands that shape barrels for families. Gratitude isn't pretending pain doesn't exist. It's seeing that pain isn't all there is." Jonah frowned. "I have nothing." "Your beating heart is still a gift, even in grief." The next walk, under fading stars, Elkanah added, "After thanks, step outside and walk 10 minutes, no purpose except to see. Leaves, sky, insects. Your body was made for joy, not just toil. Then, as the village stirs, do one secret kindness. Carry kindling, speak hope. When you lift another heart, your own grows lighter." Jonah thought of his years of isolation. Walking just to see felt foreign. On the final evening, Elkanah continued, "Feed your mind daily. Learn a tree's name, a story, a new skill. Curiosity keeps the spirit young. And before sleep, hold one beautiful moment like a candle. A bird's song, a kind glance. Let it be your last thought. That memory starves midnight overthinking." Doubt clung to Jonah. How can such small things lift a man this broken? Elkanah placed a weathered hand over his heart. A river carves stone by flowing faithfully. Do not despise the small, Jonah. Build your 5 a.m. routine and your midnight hours will be redeemed. The next morning, Elkanah was gone, his footprints leading into the mist. But Jonah felt a strange mix of abandonment and fragile hope. The first morning, Jonah forced himself awake before dawn. The darkness felt thick and hostile. He sat on his mat and felt ridiculous. But he closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for my breath, for the roof that kept the night wind out, for the strength still in my hands." The words felt foreign. His night had been brutal. Overthinking had kept him awake until the small hours. He almost laughed at the idea that a few whispered thanks could change anything. But he continued. Day after day, he rose at the 5th hour. He found 3 things, even when they seemed tiny. It became a quiet ritual, a small rebellion against the despair that had reigned. He began the morning walk. At first, his legs were heavy and his mind resisted. But slowly, the goat paths behind the village became a sanctuary. He noticed the silver-green olive leaves, the tiny purple flowers pushing through stone. The fresh air seemed to wash away some of the night's fog. The walk became the second pillar of his 5 a.m. routine, and he found his mind quieter after it. Then he tried kindness. The widow Naomi lived next door. After his walk, he began leaving bundles of clean scrap wood and kindling at her doorstep without a word, pieces too small for barrel staves, but perfect for her hearth. At first, she only grunted. Then, one morning, she caught his hand and said, "You have Miriam's heart still beating in you." That cracked something open in Jonah's chest. After the walk and the secret kindness, he sat with his tools and a piece of wood, not just crafting for survival, but learning. He learned the name of the terebinth tree, whose sap could heal wounds. He learned the song of the blackcap warbler. He taught himself to carve small figures from fallen branches, a bird, a lion, a tiny harp. His mind, which had once been a hollow drum of worry, began to fill with curiosity. This was the 4th habit, and it gave him a hunger for the day. But the true test came at night. The old overthinking would knock on his mind's door like a familiar enemy. On the hardest nights, he lay down and deliberately recalled the best moment of the day. The warmth of Naomi's words, the way dawnlight caught a spiderweb, the smooth curve of a new barrel hoop settling perfectly into place. He held that image like a candle until his breathing slowed. At first, the thoughts still intruded, but he persisted. The fifth habit slowly starved the midnight overthinking. The nights stopped being a tomb and became a refuge. Months passed. One morning, while smoothing a stave with his draw knife, Jonah caught himself humming a tune Miriam used to sing. He stopped, stunned. He had not hummed in 3 years. That night, he realized he had fallen asleep without the familiar battle. His 5 a.m. routine had, without fanfare, rebuilt his inner world. He looked at his calloused hands and whispered, "I am not cursed. I have simply been blind." Then the drought came. The stream shrank to a muddy trickle. Crops withered. People hoarded water and grew suspicious. The demand for barrels dried up. No oil to press, no grain to store. Jonah's fragile hope trembled, and the midnight overthinking returned with ferocity. "See, the habits did nothing. You are still a fool." He nearly abandoned everything. But the next morning, by force of ingrained routine, he woke at the 5th hour. He whispered, "Thank you for the shade of the rock, for the one loaf still on the shelf, for the strength to try once more." Something shifted. The gratitude did not end the drought, but it changed his posture toward it. He walked the brown hills at dawn and noticed a wildflower, the rock rose, blooming defiantly in a crevice. It needed almost no water. He learned its name and felt a deep kinship. During the walk, his mind found a stillness it had never known in crisis. The movement and the learning kept despair from settling. He continued his small kindnesses. He shared his tiny water ration to Naomi, though his own throat was dry. Seeing her relief became his own relief. And at night, he held the pale pink of that rock rose as his evening candle. The midnight overthinking, though it prowled, could not find a foothold. The habits had become an ark. When the rains finally returned, Jonah looked back at the long, hard months. He had lost weight, lost income, lost sleep, but not himself. The 5 a.m. routine had held him steady. The small kindnesses he had planted became a shelter for his own soul. Something new began to radiate from Jonah. He wasn't rich, but he was present. He wasn't powerful, but he was steady. His pre-dawn walks, his whispered thanks, his daily learning, his secret kindnesses, and his evening reflection had forged a happiness that did not depend on circumstances. His hands, once used only for hooping and planing, began carving beautiful figures from the scrap wood around his shop. A traveling merchant saw a small olive wood bird and commissioned a set of carved bowls. Jonah's craft deepened, and he hired a shy young man named Abel as an apprentice, teaching him not just the art of coopering, but the quiet rhythm of the 5 a.m. routine and the evening practice that silenced overthinking. He became a calm presence in the village. When a young mother named Talia fell ill, Jonah organized the neighbors to bring her firewood and broth. When 2 farmers quarreled over a well, Jonah sat with them, and with the peace he had cultivated, helped them find a fair share. Children who once whispered about the man who never smiled now brought him wild figs and begged for stories. His workshop, once a tomb of silence, filled with voices and laughter. Jonah's influence spread through lives he quietly touched. A young girl named Ruth, born with a twisted leg and often mocked, came to him in despair. He taught her to rise at 5 a.m., find 3 blessings, walk in the garden, and learn a new song. At night, she held a beautiful note in her mind. Her midnight overthinking, which had told her she was worthless, lost its power. She discovered she had a voice like a lark and became the village cantor. She always said, "Jonah gave me my voice by teaching me to build a morning that silenced the night." A hot-headed boy named Levi, always fighting and tormented by restless sleep, was sent to Jonah by his desperate father. Jonah simply took him on his 5 a.m. walks. He asked Levi to do one secret kindness each day and tell no one. The practice cooled the boy's fire. His mind, which had raced every night with anger and imagined slights, began to still. He became the most trusted shepherd in the valley. A widow named Dinah, struggling with anxious thoughts that robbed her of rest, received from Jonah not money, but the morning routine. She walked at dawn, learned the herbs along the path, and discovered a gift for healing salves. Her home became a place of warmth, and her nights, once a battlefield, became peaceful. So now this ancient wisdom rests in your hands. The same small keys that unlocked a cooper's heart are available to you. Not a rigid system, but 5 gentle habits in how you meet each day. Waking up 5 a.m. and whisper of gratitude, the quiet morning walk, the secret kindness, the hunger to learn, and the single beautiful memory before you sleep. They cost nothing. They require only persistence. But woven together, they can conquer your midnight overthinking and turn even the most barren season of your life into a garden of happiness.